What's up, everybody? It's Mr. Anderson back with another AP Lang video. And everybody, this video is not for me, it's for you. It's to say thank you for all you've done for me, all you've done for the channel. This has been a huge dream for me. To be able to get on here every day and spend 18 hours editing video. But you know we can't stop here, so let me know in the comments right now which of the 4 writing unit assignments has been your favorite. I gotta be honest with you, writing unit 4 is the answer for me. I love this assignment because it lets me learn a lot about all of you, and people have really been putting, their heart and soul into these assignments, and I really do appreciate that, and it's been reflected in the quality of your writing. A lot of people talking about times in their lives when they've had to move from one country to another, one state to another. A lot of people talking about injuries. And a number of folks have mentioned some experiences that have been, frankly traumatic. I think you would qualify them that way. And it just makes me need to reiterate that when it comes to the grading of these things here, the fact that you might be getting an 18.5 instead of a 19.5 on something you poured your heart and soul into, I don't want that to feel frustrating because, again, it's not a reflection of the importance of the topic you were working on. With this particular assignment, writing unit 4, in addition to the proofreading issues, which is always something I'm looking for, I was really basing the difference between like a low A and a high A on how well you incorporated those different modes, right? The exposition, narration, and analysis mode, and whether or not you remember to include that kind of descriptive sub-mode. So if all those things were there and you did that skillfully, you'll see that you had a higher grade. But even if you didn't, a lot of these essays I think could be repurposed perhaps someday for a college essay, but in general, for many of you, writing to be proud of. So everybody, what I'd like to do for the rest of this video is not so much focus on the specific skills from writing 4, but to talk about something which has been a theme for us, this idea of massaging your sentences. Treating the proofreading process as not just is it right or wrong, but trying to make the sentences sound better. And that has a lot to do with the way they start and the way they end. Also looking for things like syntactic variety and making sure that you're not developing a kind of steady, monotonous rhythm. So I'm going to display a couple different sentences from different people's assignments. And again, if you recognize one of these in here, please do not take it as a criticism. It means I really liked your essay. And in fact, I probably really liked the passage I'm putting up here. But I just would like you and like everybody to see some ways that it could be made even stronger. So here we have our first passage. This is from someone going to visit their grandparents in a foreign country, and we get the following. When I walked into their apartment for the first time, it wasn't what I was expecting, but there was also a sense of familiarity. As soon as I walked in, I recognized the smell, but I couldn't figure out why it was familiar. It was a small apartment compared to our house in Maryland, but it still felt spacey. So nothing wrong with this. Some nice things in here for sure. If we're talking though about syntactic variety, I want you to notice if you look at these sentences how sort of regular the structure is, kind of predictable, right? This sentence starts with a prepositional phrase, or sorry, a subordinating clause, when I walked into their apartment. Then we have as soon as I walked in. So we have the grammatical similarity, but also just the similarity in terms of what's happening, right? We're kind of repeating when I walked in, as soon as I walked in. But then at the end of all 3 of these sentences, we have the but there was also, but couldn't figure out why, but it still felt spacey. So if you're doing really deep, serious massaging of these sentences, the kind of repetition of these phrases might alert you. It doesn't automatically mean you need to revise, but you might think about some other options here. Now, in this case, when I notice that the author has used 3 consecutive sentences that end with that comma, but something, something, I might try to anticipate that the writer was trying to create a kind of effect here, right? They wanted to have, remember this phrase, balanced structure. And so we want to create a sense where we have 2 equal halves where it's something, 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 but something, something, something. Something, 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 but something, something, something. So we can work with that repetition of the but clause if we have a regularity on either side of the sentence. So I'm going to show you what my revision was, where I kept those comma but phrases, but rearranged the sentences so they feel more balanced. All right, here's what I came up with. Their apartment wasn't what I was expecting, but it was somehow familiar. It was small, but still felt spacey. I recognized the smell, but wasn't sure from where. And if you do it like that, then you can hear that kind of intentional parallelism with the balanced constructions. So that's one possible revision if you wanted to do something about the syntactic variety there. All right, on to our next one. And in this passage, we have somebody who is starting school for the first day, having moved not just to Maryland, but to America. And we get this. Oh, how I wished in that moment to jump in and talk to them. They seemed so kind. But I sat a couple seats away, and I was also reminded of my lack of conversation skills when I tried to come up with something to say to them. My mind was blank of words or phrases that would make me sound natural or cool. So I shut my half-opened mouth at once to prevent any stupid phrases from popping out. A really nice passage, actually, but I'd like you to pause right now, and I want you to look to see if you notice any particular parts of this that are repeating, where it creates a kind of an awkward feeling of hearing the same word multiple times, or if there is anything else that you would like to revise in what is otherwise a very good passage. So pause it here. All right, so hopefully you noticed that we did have this repetition here at the end of the word phrase, repeated right here, phrase. We also had this idea of talk to them, similar to say to them, right? And little things like that can actually kind of catch in your reader's ear. You might have also thought that this sentence here was a little bit kind of too long and needed some shaping. So here's what I did to revise this sentence. Oh, how I wished in that moment to jump in and talk to them. They seemed so kind. But I sat a couple of seats away, comma, and I was also reminded of my lack of conversation skills when I tried to come up with something to say. My mind was blank of words or phrases that would make me sound natural or cool. So I shut my half-open mouth at once to prevent anything stupid from popping out. Notice how I got rid of that word phrase down here, and I thought of a way to replace to them, so I didn't have to say to them at the end of this sentence too. All right, on to the third one. So in this third one, we have somebody, again, talking about moving, and this person from a young age was moving from New York City to, you guessed it, Maryland. So check this out. As a 5-year-old born and raised in the city that never sleeps, I was clueless about what the world outside of New York was like. All I knew was the tall skyscrapers, big screens, abundant traffic, and noisy environment that I grew up in. So in this one, I really want us focusing on the idea of weak sentence endings. Notice how in this passage there are both sentences that could be revised so they land on a stronger feeling word or phrase. We have, I was clueless about what the world outside of New York was like, and all I knew was the tall skyscrapers, big screens, abundant traffic, and noisy environment that I grew up in. So what could you do? Before I show you my solution, think about this for a second, right? If I were simply to cut the phrase that I grew up in, nothing would be lost, right? Similar, if I could rearrange this so I end with the world outside of New York, instead of having to tack on was like, I could, with very little effort, end both those sentences more strongly. So let's do that. But notice, if I get rid of the phrase that I grew up in, I end with big screens, abundant traffic, and noisy environment. Now, noisy environment is a stronger ending than that I grew up in, but it's kind of a bland phrase, right? Noisy environment sounds very clinical. So another thing I might do if I was revising the sentence is think of a better way to replace the phrase noisy environment so my last word not only feels stronger, but is more memorable. So here's what I came up with. As a 5-year-old born and raised in the city that never sleeps, I was clueless about the world outside of New York. All I knew was the tall skyscrapers, big screens, abundant traffic, and ever-present noise. And hopefully you hear how much stronger that rhythm feels at the end. So just two more, folks, here, and stick with me. We're going to continue to talk about the ends of sentences here, and I want to introduce a really important concept. I think some of the classes have heard this already, but a lot of you have not. So here we have somebody talking about a family trip. The year was 2013, and it was a day like no other in my book. Both my mom and aunt piled all 7 rowdy and goofy kids into a 2007 light gray beat-up Toyota minivan. Unsure of where the road was going to take us, I glared out the window to watch the endless journey of cornfields approaching and passing on my journey. So what I want you to notice in this one, everybody, is again, the sentence endings could be stronger, but particularly they could be stronger because of what we call prepositional phrases. And a prepositional phrase is simply a phrase that is attached to a preposition, in this case, in and on. When these end your sentences, they tend to make the sentences feel weak. So one thing I want you to do when I ask you to pause this is to think about a way to revise it so these prepositional phrases don't end the sentences. But I'd also like you to look at this phrase here. Piled all 7 rowdy and goofy kids into a 2007 light gray beat-up Toyota minivan. I like what this person is doing a lot here, right? Do you hear the beats? 2007 light gray beat-up Toyota minivan. I think that's great, but I think we could improve the punctuation there a little bit. So in addition to thinking about those prepositional phrases, think about how you would re-punctuate or perhaps rearrange this phrase here while keeping that nice choppy rhythm. Okay, pause it. And here's my solution. The year was 2013, and it was a day like no other. Together, my mom and aunt piled all 7 rowdy and goofy kids into a beat-up light gray 2007 Toyota minivan. I'm having trouble saying Toyota today. Toyota. Unsure of where the road was going to take us, I glared out the window to watch the endless miles of approaching and passing cornfields. I'm especially proud of what I did here at the ending. I like this phrase, approaching and passing cornfields. I think that is a much more interesting image. It also gets rid of the prepositional phrase. And there are some other revisions as well in here. You'll notice I just simply cut the in my book out of the year was 2013, and it was a day like no other. All right, so on to our final one today. Wait, what's that? It's another music clue. This song, which if you need a hint, was covered by Harry Styles apparently, so that should help you out, is a song from the 80s, and for a long time it might still be, the most played video on MTV. It was considered especially groundbreaking. It's not Thriller by Michael Jackson, which was also a big one, but apparently still they say that this is the most played video on MTV ever. Of course, they don't really play many videos on MTV these days. Anyway, see if you can figure out what that song is as we now go back to our final example. So here we have some exposition of somebody building up to what is going to be a rather gruesome injury. You won't see that, sorry, but here is what we got. The treadmill in my grandparents' basement was always there, but it had only become a toy once we figured out we could make it move without turning it on, which we were strictly forbidden from doing. My parents had gone out that night, so we were put in the hands of our grandparents and aunts and uncles who had been visiting at the time. All right, so everybody, do you see the prepositional phrase? I'm not going to point it out to you this time. You could actually perhaps see 2 prepositional phrases, but there's one that's especially troubling. And then is there anything else that you would want to do to improve the endings of any of these sentences? All right, hopefully you paused it. And here is my solution. The treadmill in my grandparents' basement was always there, but had only become a toy once we figured out we could make it move without turning it on, which we were strictly forbidden from doing. Now, I want you to notice that I did not actually change this first sentence at all. I like the dash construction a lot here because that dash alone gives nice emphasis to the end of that sentence. So even though you've got the phrase from doing at the end, I kind of racked my brain about ways I could rearrange that. Could you say something from which we were strictly forbidden, right? And so you could end on a stronger word, forbidden, but that sounds stilted. So it's not always the case that you need to cut out prepositional phrases. But at the last sentence, my parents had gone out that night, so we were put in the hands of our visiting grandparents, aunts, and uncles. So what I did, if you didn't notice, was I took who had been visiting at the time, and I rephrased that to put it in front of the other nouns, in this case, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. I also added some punctuation here at the end. All right, so everybody, thanks again for watching this. I know this was a longer video, but it's important that you start to see some examples, some specific examples of what real revision is. And I hope everybody is applying these principles when you are working on your writing unit stuff. It is, after all, the whole point.